All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Hillsborough County Commission on Human Trafficking. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if we can all rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, it makes sense to begin with a round of introductions. So I am Heather Curry. I'm the lead staff on the Commission of Human Trafficking, and I work for the Department of Homeless Services with Hillsborough County.
Hi, is this on, actually? Okay, it's on. Hi, I'm County Commissioner Kimberly Overman, Vice Chair of the County Commission, and I've been working on this for a little bit.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm State Attorney Andrew Warren. I'm the State Attorney here in Hillsborough County, the 13th Judicial Circuit.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Kemke. I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Trauma Center for the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Santiago Carrata, President and CEO with Visit Tampa Bay, Hillsborough County's destination marketing organization.
Good afternoon. Lee Burkhaw, Assistant Chief with Tampa Police.
Hello, Reverend Brina Fields Taylor of Beulah Baptist Institutional Church here in Tampa.
Good afternoon. Karen Perez, School Board Member, Countywide, District 6.
I'm Dottie Groover-Skipper. Until in 2 more days, I will be retired as the Florida Anti-Trafficking Director for the Salvation Army, and will focus on my foundation, Heart Dance Foundation. Been in the trenches for 30 years on this issue.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Glaister with Redefining Refuge, and I am currently a youth and family care advocate, and I also currently serve as a court liaison for the Options Court.
Good afternoon. My name's Iris Valdez-Corey Dunaway. I work with the Sheriff's Office, and I'm currently a supervisor with Child Protective Investigations.
Captain Jeffrey Harris, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. I'm the Division Commander for our Special Investigations Division.
Deborah Cromartie-Mincy, Senior Assistant County Attorney with the County Attorney's Office. I believe I'm next on the agenda. We'll go right into the first item of business on today's agenda, which is the election for chair. I will be facilitating that election. Can I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any nominations for chair?
I'd like to nominate the commissioner. She's done a lot of work on this and laid it out, so I think it would be ideal for her.
Second.
There's a second. Everyone, are there any other nominations for chair? Can I have a motion to close the nominations?
I'll move that.
Is there a second?
Second.
Wonderful. Well, then, let's go ahead and ratify Commissioner Overman as being the chair of the Hillsborough County Commission on Human Trafficking. Please raise your hand if you confirm that vote. We now have a chair for our Commission on Human Trafficking. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Overman.
Okay, great. I'll stay right here. Don't you go very far. I thank you very much. Thank you. I really very much appreciate that. We also need a vice chair. That we have a pretty robust agenda, so it'll be a great opportunity for someone to step to the plate. I'm going to ask for nominations for vice chair. Any nominations, please?
I nominate Dr. Curry for vice chair.
She's staff.
Okay.
She's unfortunately not eligible, but that's a good call. Any others?
Volunteer for it.
Well, that's really good to hear. Okay. Well, then I'm going to nominate Jeffrey Harris. So any other nominations?
Second.
Okay, you want to second it? I'm looking. No, okay, he's very quiet over there. Okay, so currently we have a nomination for Jeffrey Harris for vice chair. Seeing no other nominations, I'll close the nominations. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you, sir, for taking on the role. I appreciate it. I truly do. Just with that being said, I have bumped into a lot of you over the last year. doing great work in the area of human trafficking. And thank you, Mr. Klug, for joining us. And I think it's great that we're going to actually take on in a coordinated fashion this issue as we prepare for not only big events coming, but also as we devise ways that we care for those that are impacted by this. Later on, I'll talk a little bit more about the responsibilities and mission of that. But in the meantime, I'd like to open it up for public comments. We have set aside 15 minutes for public comments. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak. You do not need to give your address, but you do need to state your name. Any public speakers signed up? No? You don't have to be shy. It's okay. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the presentation by Deborah Cromartie-Mincy on Sunshine Law. One of the things that we are impacted by is Sunshine Law. So a quick overview to help you understand the rules of engagement is helpful. And our wonderful staff attorney is going to assist us in that area.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman. And again, welcome everyone and good afternoon. In your packet, you should have a PowerPoint presentation. We've provided that to you in note-taking form so you can take notes as we go along. Many of you, I believe, are from governmental agencies, so you're probably very familiar with the Sunshine Law. But for those of you who are not, and for those of you who just want to be entertained, then that's what I'm here to do. The Sunshine Law, your first slide, all meetings of any board or commission, of any state agency or authority, or of any agency or authority of any county at which official acts are to be taken are public meetings that are open to the public at all times, and no formal action shall be binding unless taken or made at such meeting. The board or commission must provide reasonable notice of all such meetings. The Sunshine Law is basically a law that guarantees the public has access to public records. It's a law of transparency. It's basically akin to the federal government law on sunshine, which is also known as the Freedom of Information Act. If you go to your next slide, what is its authority? It's governed by the Florida Constitution, Article 1, Section 24, as well as Chapter 286 of the Florida Statutes. On to your next slide. What is a meeting that's subject to the Sunshine Law? Basically, any gathering of 2 or more members of the same board or commission that will be discussing matters that will have foreseeable action. Basically, if you are at a meeting or not at a meeting, it's 2 people of the same board or commission that are having discussions about matters that will be foreseeably coming back to this board or body for discussion, then you're holding a meeting in violation of the Sunshine Law. Doesn't matter how many people there are. It could be 2 people, 3. It can be this entire commission. There must be certain requirements met before a meeting can be considered in compliance with the Sunshine Law. What is the scope of the Sunshine Law? Meetings on state and local levels. For example, this particular commission, because you are an arm or a branch, if you will, of the Board of County Commissioners, I call them the Mother Board, and you are a child of the Mother Board, then you are also subject to the Sunshine Law. Other criteria must be met. For instance, reasonable notice must be given, and minutes must be taken. The Sunshine Law applies to public collegial bodies like your universities, USF, UCF, Florida State, your elected or appointed boards like this particular commission, and also to public officers or staff that are acting with delegated authority. So if this commission were to delegate authority to only one person, it could be the chair, it could be some other person, then that Sunshine Law obligation follows the delegation. If I am going too fast, let me know. I can say this stuff in my sleep. So just let me know, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. And just so you'll know, the Sunshine Law does not apply to the federal government. When our board's subject to the Sunshine Law, anytime a commission, a board, a committee narrows down the focus of a particular item, If you're narrowing down issues, that means you are discussing. That means you are making decisions. If you're narrowing down all the facts and not bringing all the facts back to the full body, that means you're making or you're having some deliberations, which means that the Sunshine Law will apply, even if it's just recommendations that are coming back to the body. Even if you're just going to bring back, out of the 10 recommendations, only 5 of them, and they'll just be recommendations from this board, from that committee to this board, you've narrowed down from 10 to 5. You've made decisions. So therefore, the Sunshine Law is applicable. When are boards not subject? Again, when it's only fact-finding. If this commission goes out, or if this commission establishes a committee to go out and do some research, and if that committee brings back all of the research, not just a little bit of it, not just a third of it, because then you've done what? You've started making decisions. If you bring back all of the information back to the full body, for the full body to consider, then Sunshine Law won't necessarily apply. But if you know that you're going to be making decisions and narrowing down issues, then we need to make sure that we are in compliance with the Sunshine Law. What else is subject to the Sunshine Law? Your phone calls. Phone calls between 2 board members, 2 commission members. They are subject to the Sunshine Law. It can go from, what are you having for lunch, to how do you think the vote will be on the issue that's coming back to the next commission meeting. Conversations can escalate just that quickly. So you have to be very careful when you're having discussions, even from here to the walk to the car in the garage, about what you need. Just need to be very careful about what your discussions are when you're having discussions with another board member. Next one is meetings that are not exempt. You would think that they would be exempt from the Sunshine Law, but they're not. Investigations, meetings to discipline staff, real estate negotiations, and your quasi-judicial hearings, like code enforcement hearings and other issues like that. When does the Sunshine Law begin to apply? Good question. The minute you became appointed.
Which was last week. Just in case.
The Sunshine Law applied to you and applied to this board. How about if you're members of different boards? You're a member of this commission and you're speaking with a member of another commission or another board, then Sunshine Law does not apply, because you can't possibly be talking about matters that will be coming back to your common board. But if you are members of this same commission or members of a different board together, then you've got to be careful. How about ex officio members? They are subject to the same requirements as voting members and also subject to the Sunshine Law. What about social events? Thanksgiving, Christmas, Valentine's Day. Whatever the reason is, this commission decides to have a function outside of a typical meeting arena, then we've got to be very careful about your discussions. We could be sitting in a conference room or one of the back rooms of Applebee's. Doesn't really matter. We've got to be very careful not to have discussions that will foreseeably come back to this body for some kind of deliberation or vote. What about a bus tour or a trip? Same thing. Doesn't matter where you are still subject. The other requirement is that notice must be given to the public that there will be a meeting. Case law provides that notice has to be reasonable. There's no particular amount of time. Our county liaison or commission liaison will be handling the notice issues. I am also available, but if there are any issues controversial issues that will be on the board or emergency issues that will be coming back before this commission, then at least 24 hours would be a reasonable time period, and we can work together on that. So does the Sunshine Law require that an agenda be written? No. even though we have one, and it's my understanding that there will be one before every meeting, an agenda is not necessary for the Sunshine Law to be in compliance. And can you all move away from that agenda? Absolutely, because an agenda is not necessarily required. However, if there are going to be controversial topics, emergency topics, it would be good that that agenda be followed. Or if they're going to be emergency topics, it'll be good if the topic of that issue will be published in some public notice, just so the public has an understanding of what will be discussed and will have the opportunity to attend. Are there any questions? You all look very excited and.
Just for clarity,
Yes,
if we
ma'am.
have something that we want to discuss with the board, we would send to staff liaison all the information, and then staff would get.
That's the
Question
preferred
out or
method,
discussion
yes.
out?
Just so that, and I've seen this happen. I've seen it where starting off very innocently, emails going back and forth between commission or board members, and then all of a sudden, if you follow the email trail, it's becoming a meeting. They're wanting to discuss because one question can typically lead to something else, which could typically lead to something else, and before you know it, I'm on the email saying, stop, no more, okay? Because you're now having a meeting. So yes, we do prefer that you send all of your emails, anything that you may have, things that you want to share, to your commission liaison, to me, just so that we can get it out to everyone else. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to address that too, just to be helpful. One of the advantages to having an agenda is that there's an item down at the bottom called future business items, and you already have one of them on there, whether you realize it or not. But that it's at that point of the meeting, if there's items that you're thinking of as a board member or conversations you've had with non-board members that you'd like to bring to the table for discussion or inclusion in the agenda so that we can have these public conversations, that's when to do it. It took me a little while to figure that out too. It's like, oh, how do I get this on the agenda? So one of the best ways to do that is bring it up during the meeting. In the event that because we're not meeting every single month, one of the best other alternative ways is to get the information to Dr. Curry, and then she'll make sure that we add it to the list of items that need to come up at the next meeting. We also have the ability to send out basic information with a blind copy to all members. Whatever you do, don't reply back. Either send your reply to Dr. Curry, and so that if there's an additional question or more information you need, that's fine. But don't start a conversation, as Deborah mentioned, and end up having a meeting. Because it is kind of easy to run into it. Obviously, you all know I'm on the commission, and we get invited to go to places together. And so it is incumbent on you to kind of understand you just don't talk about this kind of business as it pertains to the commission or any other board where there's overlay, and there is a little bit here, not a lot, but a little bit. So are there any other questions, or did you have any other comments that you wanted to?
No, ma'am, if there are no other questions. Are there?
Okay, great. When in doubt, call Deborah. So if you're not sure. And we do refer to county attorneys when we need some guidance on how to handle something, and they're wonderful about giving us good guidance, so don't hesitate to do that. Okay, next item on the agenda is the county resolution. In your packet is a resolution that was approved last year as we established the commission back in December. There's a variety of whereases in there that sort of talks about why we're all here. But what I wanted to cover today, so if you haven't seen the ordinance before, it's a good read if you really like legalese. But it actually is very good information on the purpose. And I think that's what we want to make sure is very clear here. In section 2 on page 3 covers the purpose and work of the commission, why we're here. And so we can stay focused on our goals, and then if those goals should change, we can either do that via subcommittee, or we'll have to go back and review the ordinance for modifications. But for right now, our focus is primarily public awareness and outreach, making sure that we give the public the tools that they're in need of having to understand what human trafficking is and how to see it and what to do about it, to establish relationships with our community, with educational programming for public and key industries to recognize the indicators of human trafficking and to learn how to report suspected human trafficking. To advocate for strategies, financially or otherwise, to aid rescued victims of human trafficking. And to support local and statewide efforts to identify opportunities for positive impact and improved outcomes for victims and service providers through data collection, sharing, and analysis. One of the things that I learned about this issue is that there are an amazing number of fabulous folks out here working on it. And one of the opportunities here is for us to be able to see, one, what we're doing, who we're impacting, who's involved, and how do we interact together to be able to improve investigations, but also to provide services to those that have been traumatized by human trafficking. So one of the third item, or D, item D, really covers that area and how important it is. Item 10 mentions the public awareness purpose of the commission and recommends that the Board of County Commission sponsor opportunities and other coordinated efforts to fund media campaigns that may be executed and advise the BOCC on any other proposals necessary and apply for funding as needed. Didn't say that, but that's basically what it's for. And where we can create partnerships to avoid, full government funding, obviously we're going to look for that, but we'll have to ask for the board's assistance in any effort that requires an investment in these activities. Additionally, we need to find those professionals in our industry that have the greatest access to not only help those that suffer from human trafficking, but to assist in making sure that something is done quickly. So connections with the health and medical industry, teachers, counselors, clergy, attorneys, judges, government employees, and members of the general public that will have access to people who are vulnerable to human trafficking. The great thing is that we've got, as I mentioned, a lot of folks already at the table that are already doing a lot of this work in one way, shape, or another. So our goal is to coordinate that and make sure that we have a good voice in making sure we have a zero tolerance for human trafficking. And when we define human trafficking, we're not just talking about sex trafficking. We're also talking about labor trafficking. So we want to make sure that we understand what it is, what it looks like, and what we do. And the commission shall act solely in its advisory committee to the Board of County Commission. So the commission still has the responsibility of enacting the rules of Hillsborough County. This gives us the opportunity to provide the Board of County Commission with guidance and requests and information so that they can adopt certain policies and procedures to help get it delivered. Just to make sure everybody was clear and to make sure the public knew why we're here, I thought I would go through that and cover that. Are there any questions, comments, things that you heard that you have questions about?
I just want to make a comment. Tomorrow there is a launch of the SAFE Collaborative, which I think you're familiar with. And the SAFE Collaborative is formed, it's a tri-county, it's not an organization, it's an alliance that will be a robust fundraising machine for items that are needed, gaps in our community in the tri-county area. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention in case you weren't aware that it's finally launching. Tomorrow is the first meeting of the advisory board.
Okay, great.
Council.
That's good to know.
So
That's good to know.
focus
That's
on
sort of a new
fundraising.
business item, but I appreciate it because anywhere we can find good partners in this effort is truly appreciated. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of folks working on it. Let me move on just a little bit to the second item that is still on the agenda. We've had a request by the Board of County Commissioners to consider adding additional positions. Currently, the city of Tampa is represented. However, we have not included the city of Temple Terrace or Plant City. So there will be revisions to the ordinance coming that we can discuss and decide how we want to approach that and ask the board to consider making a modification there. Additionally, there was a request to add a representative of a lived experience expert in order to make sure that the voice of those that have experienced this trauma can be brought to the table for awareness and for assistance and focus. So that's something we'll be adding to the commission and the ordinance associated with it. So I anticipate that we'll bring that back at the next board meeting. All right, now we need to actually figure out what our bylaws say. And the commission status of women as well. We will be reviewing the board bylaws, and I'm going to ask the board to cover that particular area. Right now it's in draft form. There's not a huge urgency with this one as much as there is with making sure we're clear about our direction. But I'd like for you to cover that particular area, if you want to.
Yes. As the commissioner just noted that the bylaws are still being drafted, and it will be ready for your next meeting for your review and approval. Yeah.
Well, that was quick.
Okay, so we can just review the proposed meeting dates, see if those are workable dates for everyone. So it's every other month. It'll be the fourth Wednesday of every month. We're on the fourth Wednesday, yeah. Fourth Wednesday of every month. So if we want to take a look at that and see if that works, then we can call that one done. Okay.
Do we see any major conflicts with your schedule at this point? One of the reasons why we're not meeting with greater frequency is that there is a state task force that meets quarterly. And we don't have all the dates for their calendar this year. But what we wanted to do is not have you have to go to that one if you wanted to, and then also attend our meeting, because a lot of us have a lot of meetings to go to. So we thought that we could get a report, which I'm going to ask you to do in the future, on what the state is doing, and as well as, and then cover our business locally at these meetings here. So.
The next statewide council meeting is in Tallahassee next
March 5th.
week, on March the 5th, at 1 o'clock, I believe, in the Capitol building.
And it does rotate around the state.
Okay, so the next item of business is to cover briefly what is an emerging effort, the Hillsborough Heroes Against Human Trafficking program. And this is a training endeavor to engage community partners across different sectors. And so we've got a lot of possibilities right now that we're developing in terms of potential partnerships. And as we put that on the ground, we'll get a greater sense of the architecture and how big this can be. But currently, we've engaged Jeremy Lewis and the International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators, as well as his third-party vendor who really did a lot of the development of the actual web training, Alive Tech. And so that program is offering community members and partners a free 50-minute training, which is a really outstanding training. We've taken a look at it several times, and it looks fantastic. It's very thoroughgoing in a very short amount of time. And IAHTI, International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators, which I'm getting very fast at saying, has done an outstanding job because they bring together both their kind of awareness and their responsivity to the activist field and to lived experience experts, as well as bringing law enforcement perspectives. And so those of us who've seen it so far have been impressed with the quality of the work and what they have to offer. And somebody asked the question of why would the boots on the ground folks are important, absolutely. This has a broader reach than that, in part because all of us are community members and neighbors as well as employees, right? And so that raises our awareness in the sense of as we're traversing the streets and we're going down Bush Boulevard or Nebraska Avenue or wherever we may be, that we have a greater kind of sensibility for what that might look like. And so we're pretty excited about that right now. And we'll have more development with that over the course of these commission meetings.
We go away.
Yes.
To the next item. One of the advantages to this online presentation is that it gives an employer or an association or a church group or any organization that's not the county per se, a tool to be able to distribute out to their network, whether that be their employees or their association members, otherwise, an opportunity to take this coursework online in your own time. It's an hour long. It gives us a measure of the outreach, where it goes. We ask very limited information in terms of, people not really wanting to put their stuff on something that's like this. Just to get a locality of where individuals are living and possibly working. In this particular case, what industries are being educated and outreached. And that way, it's done on your own time. So if an employer decides, well, my employees are on the road all the time. They visit, every retail store in the county. They have more vision than most of us that sit possibly in an office all day long, right? So giving that employer an opportunity to have a tool to really be a great hero, we want to make sure that tool is available at little or no cost. Now, that's not all the story, which Dr. Curry will tell, but I think it's important for us to realize that we wanted to make sure this is such an important piece that we want to make sure that training is available. It's not to take away from the specific professionals training. So, for example, law enforcement has state guidelines on the training that law enforcement has to have. It's not to replace that. It's to supplement to the general public information to help them know what it looks like, understand what the impact is, what do you do about it, and how you can help. So I just want to make sure it's clear what the whole program is. But we wanted to make it easy for people to do, and this is really awesome.
So additionally, a very similar training has been developed for all Hillsborough County employees. So that's roughly 5,000 employees who will also be trained in this regard, right? And the crucial element of that is not just, it's see something, say something, right? And so at the end, there's actually a resource of who do you call, because that's a big question for people. When you see something, what is it you're supposed to do with that information? And so it very much hones in on here's what you can do once you do detect that, or if a question raises in your mind. Right? So it's a pretty exciting project, and that's launching very, very quickly. So we also have Scott Stromer here to talk about the procurement policy, which you have a copy of in your very thorough packets here.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Stromer, Director of Procurement for Hillsborough County. So what you have before you is a draft policy. So our procurement policy, this is a new chapter that we'll insert into the procurement policy. And we've reviewed the policies over the last, probably over the last 6 months to a year. We did start out with Houston's policy, take a look at that. Houston's policy was really more aspirational in nature. The Board of County Commissioners gave very clear direction. They wanted something that was actionable, very deliberate, and something we could really that was meaningful. So the federal acquisition regulation, it went through an update in January of 2019, I believe is what it was. And so they took that on and actually prescribed language for that. So we've taken that language and actually adapted it for us. And so that's what the policy itself is based on, is the federal acquisition regulation. So it's defensible. It's kind of the gold standard when it comes to it, and it's very deliberate. The two accompanying documents, there are clauses, which, because we're going through this, I'm going to go ahead, my advice to the board is going to be just go ahead and add in the EEO language as well as part of that chapter. It's already in our contracts now, but we're going to move it to the broader policy so it's also there. So the two clauses, the EEO clause and the combating human trafficking clause, that's the language that's developed that will be inserted into our contracts that are administered by the board. So that's what those two documents are. So there's no conflict between any of those. It's just that's how we're going to implement that. And then we'll set up the procedures and so forth. But it is a draft. And just a couple key points for you to think about. Doing this in kind of a little bit of bubble, but I need smarter people to kind of help me with this. So we've set the trigger at $250,000. where you're required to prepare a compliance plan, submit that compliance plan, and if it's a term contract over more than a year, that it takes annual certification to make sure that you are certifying that you are following your plan. An additional step we've taken is that if you're a subcontractor, you're still required to follow the prime who's required to do that is required to make sure all the subs understand and post the notices and all that. But we've taken the extra step that if you're a subcontractor that also has a value of $250,000 or more, you are also required to do your own compliance plan and annual certification as long as that contract's in place because of the mass. So they're both held accountable. And it's just monitoring those contracts. And we deal with reporting, that it goes to the hotline and all of that. So the document's intended to, really just give you kind of something to start with. So you're not starting from a blank sheet of paper. So with that, I'll certainly answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Scott, how did you come to the $250,000 number? And can you give us an estimate of the percentage of contracts that the county enters that would hit that threshold?
Yeah, so the percentage of contracts, so in any given time, any given meeting for the board, so we'll take probably 10, 15 items to the board about every 2 weeks. So that's kind of the volume. But at any given time, we have about $1.5 billion in contracts outstanding. In any given year, about $1 billion in contracts of just normal goods and services. So it's hard to say. It's not when you have large construction projects, those are some of the prime ones. The 250 number comes from, that is the formal threshold that requires board approval. Okay, so we have some so I can prove up to 100, the county administrator can prove up to 250, and then the board has to do everything over 250. So that's what that's based on. And we tried to have just kind of a realistic look at, it's going to take some effort to monitor these and get the compliance plans and all that and try to keep it reasonable. $50,000, we have a lot of $50,000 contracts so we can go back and do that analysis again. The 250 is really kind of a placeholder in there, whatever we think may make sense. So.
Yeah, I think we'd want the number at a place where ideally it's every contract, but we know that that's not feasible. So to do it in a way where it's not actually infringing on the work that the county's trying to do, but if it's consistent with board approval, I think that's a good starting place for it.
So I think it's important too that they are still required to comply with the law when it comes to human trafficking, regardless of the size of the contract. So we'll have language in all of our contracts just to highlight that point. They may just not have to do a compliance plan and annual certifications and that type of stuff. So, but it'll still be there, and we'll make sure that it's followed.
Thank you. One of the things that we wanted to make sure as the county is that we are very aware, and we aren't going to, like I said, zero tolerance. So the first thought was, well, we want to make sure we're not doing business with people that are doing things that they shouldn't do. So that was the first start. But the second part is we'd like to actually roll out something similar to the MBE program, where if you've got someone that has made a significant contribution towards this fight and has followed a series of benchmarks and educated all their employees, those kinds of things. And that's part of our conversation is how do we create that kind of program where it makes sense? They ultimately, at some point in time, the reason they're there is they would like to possibly do business with the county or related organizations. So we wanted to make sure that we had within our contract something that made sense. And so the first start, because we're administrators, is what do we do about procurements? So thank you, Scott, very much for your assistance. Are there any other questions? Okay, outreach efforts. Do you want to go ahead?
Okay, well, the primary outreach effort right now that we're focused on is the Hillsborough Heroes program, which we just talked about some. Additionally, there have been a lot of efforts to kind of create an active conversation. And so I've gotten in touch with many of you in an effort to figure out what the lay of the land is here. And so I think that outreach, what we're trying to do is make sure that it's reflective and responsive to the folks who've been key players in this for a long time. But that's when I also want to put into kind of a future item thing is what kinds of outreach efforts would be really beneficial for those of us who are on this commission to help foment in the community. So we'll leave that as a topic for conversation that is ongoing throughout. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think so.
Okay, we're good.
Actually, it's more under future business, but I'll talk about outreach. Okay, there's a reason all of you are sitting around the table. So while you've all introduced each other, although we've had some late additions, it wouldn't hurt to hear, besides the fact that we probably got a phone call saying, hi, will you do this? To hear from what perspective do you come to this table, to this conversation. We only have 2 other items that are really quick reports, but I think it's important for everyone around the room to have an idea of who's in the room and why they're here, or what their primary connection to this particular topic is, so that we get to know each other a little more. Since this is the place that we can have these kinds of conversations, I figured now's a good time to get it done. So we want to start, I'm going to start with Dottie. You said a little bit about what you were doing, but you didn't mention much about the task force on a statewide level, so I'd love for you to share
Yes, I wanted to keep
that.
it short and sweet, but, so indulge me right now, I guess. I am honored to be appointed by our Attorney General to the Statewide Council on Human Trafficking, and so I'm happy to be a liaison between that body to this body, so we're all on the same page and in line with what the state is doing and what, we want to accomplish here. So I'm also on the, I'm appointed by our governor to the Drug Policy Advisory Committee, which goes hand in hand with issues of human trafficking. So I'm happy to make any appropriate related report outs from that body as well. I did mention I will be retiring from my position as a Florida Anti-Trafficking Director for the Salvation Army on Friday, which it's bittersweet, but this will allow me to work even deeper in the trenches in my own community rather than focus statewide like I've been doing. So I'm very excited about that, and will utilize too my private organization that is a 501c3 and been in the trenches for many years, going into the strip clubs and the brothels in Tampa and working and providing resources to the folks that are enslaved in those types of establishments. So I really feel like that kind of boots on the ground that I've been doing for so long enables me to be better at decision-making on these kind of councils, because being in the trenches is, you learn a lot. So I guess that's a little bit about myself, and I'm thrilled to be appointed to this council.
Thank you very much. Jennifer?
Hi, I am Jennifer Glaister, and I'm with Redefining Refuge. We actually had the first safe home established in Hillsborough County and the state of Florida. I get to work every day with young people who have been affected by sexual human trafficking. I'm very excited about this commission. Thing that I really, really would like to see us do is be able to work on prevention as well, because I'm guessing that probably, especially my CPI friend down here and those of you that are in law enforcement, you see way before this ever happens that a child has something going on at home that they could be led in this direction. And I'd like us to be able to point out what those triggers are, be able to shed light on things that most of us wouldn't even think of that can lead to human trafficking, such as social media, things of that nature. Connie's dealing with the strip clubs and the brothels. What I see every day right now is familial human trafficking, families trafficking their own children, or children, sadly, having to traffic themselves. So I'm just really excited about getting the word out there about how, before this ever happens, before we ever have to react to it, let's put a stop to it so that young boy or that young girl isn't put in that position to begin with.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
You might want to introduce yourself, because we went around the table earlier.
Yeah, I'm Charles Klug. I'm the principal counsel of Port Tampa Bay, and the port's been very active recently in this endeavor. We don't have any issues at the port, but we recognize this is something that a lot of ports, seaports around the EOS and the world do not really want to draw attention to because it looks like they have a problem. And so it's a really awareness issue. And so we've been in the forefront of working with DHS and USDOT, and Paul Anderson, our CEO, is on several national committees on this, to draw attention to this issue of human trafficking. And so one of the things we've done with that is we've actually created this little brochure. It's very small, handed out to all the truckers, and Make the Call, Save Lives is the name of it. So let truckers know that be careful, look, be aware that there might be someone, you're transporting or trafficking, or you see someone at a rest stop, you see someone in the bathroom, et cetera, that may need some help. And so it's just drawing attention to that. Also, we work with this group called Cure Freight in Port Tampa Bay, along with a group called Truckers Against Trafficking, and the American Association of Port Authorities, raising awareness for the types of illicit activity associated with human trafficking. We created this brochure. It was in the Grammy packets at the Grammy Awards this year. We've also used this poster in our port terminals and also in bathrooms and stalls, just for everyone to be aware of this. And really the idea for us is to draw awareness to it. We don't want to have an issue, and so we're trying to be proactive in this. So we have 10,000 truck moves a day at our port, and so we think that's the place that we can have the most visible aspect to drawing attention to human trafficking.
That's great. Glad to have you on board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Iris?
My name's Iris Valdez-Corey. I'm with Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office in Child Protections. I'm currently the supervisor of a specialized investigations unit that specifically handles the human trafficking investigations. So many times we're the first line of intervention. We come in contact with, obviously, our foster care children who are currently engaged in human trafficking, numerous runaways, in addition to community children. And like she had indicated, that we are seeing more familial types of investigations going on where the children, and it's not so much in the forefront, but later on, they do disclose that there are concerns for their family having put them into those situations. So we're hoping that at this point that we do bring more awareness, that we make some changes, and hopefully see less of those types of investigations.
Captain Jeffrey Harris, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Obviously, the Sheriff's Office is more of an enforcement arm to stop and combat human trafficking. Our Sheriff, Chad Cronister, has been instrumental in our section being able to be proactive in this approach. As far as some of our operations, I'm in charge of conducting the undercover and covert human trafficking operations, to include hotel, motel operations, massage parlors, et cetera. We try and stay very proactive in hitting all the different areas where human trafficking can occur, with a specific focus on sex buyers and stopping the demand for the sex buying. And in doing that, we've seen a great reduction in the demand. Anything from social media forums that talk about stay out of Hillsborough County, stay out of the area, law enforcement's in the area, law enforcement's at this hotel, law enforcement's on this street. We're also doing some proactive initiative with artificial intelligence as far as some of our chat bots, basically, for people that are cruising the internet on some of these escort websites. As a deterrent mechanism, they're getting a deterrent from the sheriff's office, basically just saying, hey, you've been visiting a website that's known for sex trafficking and escort and prostitution, and that we know who you are. So that's just a small portion of what we're doing to combat the demand. Obviously, we're out on the street daily. I have a group that works nothing but the proactive side of this, and we have operations several times a month, and we're just out there combating it on the enforcement side.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
As a senior county attorney with the county attorney's office, I've been appointed to serve as legal counsel for this commission. So I am here to serve you in legal matters that may come up. I draft documents, the resolution that you all went over not too long ago. I drafted it. I'll be drafting your bylaws with the assistance of the chair and the commission liaison, Dr. Curry. And we'll be reviewing and drafting other documents and things that you all will be involved with as well. And I'm here for any questions that you may have.
Well, like my other endeavors here at the county since I joined last March, this has been like learning a language by immersion, right? And so my background had more to do with kind of homelessness, but generally speaking, community vulnerabilities. And this is certainly an opportunity for strengthening ourselves as a community. And I think that this commission has this opportunity to draw on all of your fields of expertise and the wisdom that you have from the years that you've been here to create something that is a thoroughgoing response to the phenomenon in a way that's sustainable, not just for the Super Bowl, but beyond and before. So that's me.
She's pretty humble. She's pretty much a rock star. And she has a rock star group of people that she works with. But she also serves as liaison to the Juvenile Justice Board and a whole bunch of other things, too. So, but I actually had found some interest in this particular topic a lot of fold as a past employer and watching and working with various different companies and how they treated their employees, to being hypersensitive to domestic violence situations. And then actually as serving on the Juvenile Justice Board early on, I learned that not only were our kids in our juvenile system oftentimes victims of human trafficking, but they were rarely actually found to be a victim before they found themselves in trouble. And that our foster kids in our foster care system are vulnerable and have been a victim of this too. Those two things just said, okay, I'm not sitting on the chair anymore. This is something that's critically important. And while I didn't run on that particular item when I was running for office, it has a very big place in my heart to make sure that we find a way to reduce the trauma that's caused in people's lives as it pertains to this. So having an opportunity to have a big voice, I'm going to use it. So thank you.
First, let me applaud the commissioner and everyone here today and their agencies for participating in this commission. As state attorney, our focus is on public safety, especially for protecting the most vulnerable people in our community and standing up for victims. It is a team effort to eradicate human trafficking from our community, which is why we need law enforcement in the nonprofit sector and the government sector. And it takes all those efforts to identify the victims, to provide support for them, to make arrests for the people who are trafficking and exploiting, especially young people and often young women. And when we do all that, ultimately it's up to the state attorney's office to actually prosecute the person so that we can solve that problem. It all goes away if we're not able to build a successful prosecution against the person who is actually doing this in the first place. I want to applaud the Sheriff's Office for the work we've done with them over the past year, as well as all our law enforcement partners to do a better job of identifying these cases. We actually just successfully completed the first real human trafficking, sexual exploitation prosecution in several years in this county for someone who had found a 15-year-old runaway and was sexually exploiting her for money. We're here because we participate in informally and formally in various other task forces, the AG's task force, the U.S. Attorney's Office one, the new Region 1 St. Pete Police, and now the Super Bowl task force as well. I think it's great that the county has taken the position that we need to do a better job of supporting the survivors and the victims. And we look forward to having that support as we try to build cases, because without the victims' support there, it makes it extremely difficult for us to successfully prosecute the traffickers, which means that they end up right back in our streets victimizing our children.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathleen, and I'm with the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. You know, we partner with almost everybody in this room, and so it's pretty amazing to be here for me. We have some very strategic ways that we work with victims of human trafficking. Our 211 hotline is sometimes the first way that they reach out. We also have our Certified Rape Crisis Center. We have, within 120 hours of the incident, do all the medical forensic exams, as well as help folks who might have been assaulted years ago, beyond that time. We have trauma counseling at 4 different locations, and we have care coordination. And I think care coordination is what really fits the human trafficking needs the most. We have access to all of you and thousands of other resources. And so when someone comes in and they are trafficked, or when one of our advocates are able to go out on a rescue and be there at that moment, they can begin right away giving them the resources that they need. And also be that conduit, because I know that this is a scary time for someone who has been trafficked. And sometimes the life looks better than our life. And so being able to be that person and have that one advocate that can support that victim and give him or her what they need to be able to heal and to move on and to work with law enforcement so that we can have successful prosecutions. That's so important, and be able to connect them to the myriad of services that are needed. So we're very grateful to have everyone in this room, and as well as be able to partner to be able to support these vulnerable victims. And that's one other thing I want to say too, is I don't think we're giving recognition, and we need to those that are the most vulnerable to human trafficking, which is teens and children, LGBT youth, homeless people, people with disabilities, the people that don't have any voice, because who would believe that it would happen to them? Thank you.
Well, good afternoon again. Santiago Carrata with Visit Tampa Bay. And I think I'm here because I bring along a huge industry of hospitality providers. You know, we often think of hotels as the primary hospitality industry, but there is so much more that encompasses hospitality. When you think of restaurants and entertainment venues and attractions and all that goes along with the visitor experience. And so the outreach efforts for me will be of primary importance, because we have so many eyes and ears and boots on the ground out there that can be proactive, that can take action, because like someone said, some of us sit in offices, some of us are out in the community, but that's what our folks do all day long, all year long, is they're out there in the community. So from the port to the airport, we're a not-for-profit with over 800 partners, but our outreach is so much more than that. And for me specifically, I don't want it to be an event-specific issue. I want it to be an everyday issue, because Super Bowls come and go, other events come and go, but being there and preventing every single day is really the message that I want to take out to our industry and make sure that I champion not just, you know, a sexy event situation, but every single day that we're out there performing in the industry. So again, I want to be that mouthpiece to go back. I want to be able to bring that training to them. And our industry is very proactive. They've been trained, but we want to make sure that every single employee that's in the hospitality industry is aware of the issue and can prevent it from happening.
Good afternoon, Lee Burkhaw, Assistant Chief, Tampa Police. And it's an honor to be here representing the City of Tampa and Mayor Castor and Chief Brian Dugan and the citizens of Tampa. Tampa Police Department takes this very serious. I've been with the agency for over 23 years now, and this is a horrific crime that requires everybody's attention. So I applaud the Commissioner for putting this together and bringing the task forces together. It's not just everybody operating in a silo, it's how we can be more synergized and effective in our approaches. So I think this is a great opportunity to enhance that. And our police department mission statement is to reduce crime and enhance the quality of life, but part of that is about the victims and helping the victims out. And then it's our response to prevent, mitigate, and then how we respond to the victims. So I think that's also an angle that we can look at and enhance our approach to the victims. As the state attorney said, we're on numerous task forces, and I think we have the luxury of this commission to have a member from almost every task force I can think of. So we've cross-referenced everything, which will greatly help. And as Santiago said, this is not just a special event or a major event issue. This is a 365-day-a-year issue. And it's not just us staying this. I'm doing extensive research on the topic for my PhD, and there's numerous academic articles out there that talk about it not being focused specifically on just one event. Matter of fact, even Polaris, which is the top website for human trafficking, and the hotline even notes in there that it's not just a Super Bowl event, and it's a 365-day-a-year event. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to helping to make a difference.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Good afternoon again, Reverend Brina Fields Taylor of Beulah Baptist Institutional Church. And I first want to say thank you for the opportunity to serve in this capacity. My reason for being here on this commission is really to raise awareness amongst the faith-based community. We do a great job of educating our constituents, particularly our young people, on faith-based concepts, but I think we can do more in the area of social issues such as human trafficking. A lot of our churches do have very active youth departments, and I think it's important that we reach young people where they are, that captive audience, to help them understand what this issue really means and how they can avoid being trafficked before it even becomes an issue for them. We want to make sure that they're avoiding the issue completely. So that is my reason for being here, is to raise awareness amongst the faith-based community. Thank you.
Like everyone else, I want to echo, thank you for bringing everyone at this table together, because this is such an important topic, but also, an important issue that's happening to our children. I'm a school board member, but also I'm a licensed clinical social worker and also a certified traumatologist. And I bring the voice of mental health to our school district. Our school district here in Hillsborough County is the 7th largest in the nation. One of the things that attracts the sex trafficking industry, just alone in Hillsborough County, we have 220,000 students. And when you talk about the familiar sex trafficking issue, what we do in Hillsborough County is we're providing the students who are affected by that the mental health services in our schools. And so we fight daily to be able to provide the staffing and that safe place and the safe haven in our schools, because we see our students in our schools we see them daily, and we know that when a student is missing, when a student is not coming to school regularly, our social workers, our psychologists, and our counselors go to do those home visits. And that is one of the things that tries to keep our students safe. So with the sex trafficking issue here in Hillsborough County, Hillsborough County is committed to decreasing and eliminating the sex trafficking along with everyone else at this table. So that's what I'm doing here. That's why I'm participating. And thank you for bringing this voice here regarding this issue.
My name is Kevin Durkin. I'm a detective sergeant with the Tampa International Airport Police Department. And on behalf of the Hillsborough County Aviation Authority, I thank you for including us. As you know, we are heavily networked with our partners, with the city and the county, various federal agencies, the port, the state's attorney's office. 23 million passengers come through Tampa International on an annual basis. And of course, it'll peak with the Super Bowl mission, but I support the concept of combating human trafficking on an ongoing basis. To service 23 million passengers a year includes all of these service industries, and we are hoping to bring the message from this initiative to all the eyes and ears that we have at Tampa International Airport. There's a lot of support staff, car rentals, concessions, restaurants, all the people that we've spoken about, all the eyes and ears that are out there that can render us assistance. And we work on a daily basis with all of our law enforcement partners, and thank you on behalf of Tampa International Airport for having us.
Well, thank you. That is terrific, because now everybody knows who everybody is, although you probably, half of you knew who you all were. So, but I think for those that are kind of new to the group, it doesn't hurt, and it helps the public understand what a great collaborative we've got going on here. There were only 2 other items on the agenda formally. One was to discuss the statewide council on human trafficking. As Dr. Curry mentioned, as well as Dottie Grover-Skipper brought up, the AG has an overall task force broken up by the various different districts, and they're called task force. So when I first got into this, I'm like, okay, is it a district? Is it a task force? Is it, there were all the different names, who's on it, where do we start, and who's on first and who's on second. What's great, though, is those meetings are not only televised and recorded, so you can watch them later if you can't get to the various different areas, but they are quarterly, and they rove around the state. So we have had one here. The next one's in Jacksonville. There was one in, next one's in Tallahassee. There's one in Jacksonville. There's typically one down in West Palm Beach. Is that?
After the Tallahassee one, it'll be back down in Miami.
Miami,
And then I
okay.
forget where the next one is after.
Orlando's the third one? Okay.
Tampa.
And then Tampa.
And then Tampa back.
So it moves around. And then our local task force meetings rove around sort of this district area. So where was the last time I ran into you?
I think it was at the statewide council in Orlando.
In Orlando.
Last year when it was Orlando.
Right, and then there was one up in Brooksville not too long ago. But you will not have a lack of meetings if you just really like this topic and want to learn all you can. There's no lack of opportunities to learn about what other areas are doing, what we're doing, and what the state is doing. We've seen some powerful legislation come through in the last 2 years, and more coming. So that helps support our efforts. So Dottie, if you'll be prepared for meetings, and just let us know if you're not able to come.
Absolutely.
We'll include a report on the statewide task force each meeting, and that way we can keep up to date with what the AG is doing.
Of course, happy to.
Additionally, locally, there's the Super Bowl, what is that, 25? 55? I really am not that old, okay? Task Force on Human Trafficking, because we're getting ready for the Super Bowl next year. And we just had the one down in Miami. And so I'm sure there was a whole slew of folks that went down to observe how that went. I'm looking forward to getting a report on how that goes, and then ways that we can participate in the specific task force for the Super Bowl, where we can aid and assist in those efforts rather than duplicate. So we'll figure out. I think Brianna Fox, Dr. Fox, is she spearheading that at USF? Well, at least last meeting I went to, she was involved in it. So we may ask or any one of you can give us an update on where we are with that. Does anybody want to volunteer anything now?
No, as far as the public safety aspect of the Super Bowl, our operation is like basically what Jeff was talking about. It's going to be law enforcement sensitive about the details of undercover operations and how we're going to go about that. So there might be some public aspect that we can report back to it, but some of it will be just developing an operational plan and a portion of that. We do have some guest speakers scheduled. We didn't schedule Brianna Fox yet. I don't know if she'll be scheduled for that, but she did speak to the statewide council.
Great, thank you very much.
Commissioner,
Yeah.
I just want to say, too, that I was in Miami back and forth a lot for a lot of the outreach activities in Miami, and so I certainly don't mind kind of reporting out on what I experienced down there and the outcomes that they had with hotel motel outreaches into the convenience stores, taking missing children's booklets into just the convenience stores alone. They identified, I think, 16 missing children just from that outreach, and the hotel motel outreaches, they also identified approximately the same number of missing children from these missing children booklets that are provided by the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. So I know that the two organizations that were spearheading the hotel motel and the convenience store outreaches, they're already planning on coming here and setting up command posts to do that again. So happy to make those connections or whatever. They had very successful outreaches in Miami, and also outreaches into the strip clubs. There was, you might have heard, there was called the Stripper Bowl right after the Super Bowl in Miami at one of the biggest, you haven't heard about that, one of the biggest strip clubs in Miami, and they identified, I'm not sure how many victims of human trafficking that were forced to participate in the Stripper Bowl. So I really would like to have more conversation with our law enforcement to ensure that there's no Stripper Bowl here in Tampa Bay during the Super Bowl.
Wow, that's amazing.
I thought so too.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you very, very much.
So I think she brought up a great point, and I'm thinking myself is basically what we need to do is find out where the gaps are, because so many people are doing so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
And we could just find out, maybe report back what we find out and figure out where those gaps are and then attack those gaps.
Right.
Because there's going to be 100 different people doing different things.
That's right, but we need to
Somebody's missing
collaborate.
something somewhere, and then maybe we can help fill that void.
Yeah, item number D, section 2. Exactly. The only other thing I wanted to mention that many may not know, we've had a great deal of outreach from Uber. They are very interested in being a good Hillsborough Heroes Against Human Trafficking partner. So I'm looking forward to having more talks with them. They're very interested in making sure their drivers are informed, but also that they provide outreach information just similar to what you're doing at the port as a way of raising awareness. So I think we're going to do some great work here. And like I said, I don't want it to be duplicative of what's being done, but a way of bringing that information together so that we make sure we don't have the gaps. And where there's opportunities to get it right and do it better, that we have those opportunities to get it done. So.
One item on the future business items to raise for the agenda. I think the commission should think about metrics for success that we look at over a period of time. These are very difficult to measure success in this arena. The perpetrators lurk in the shadows, and the victims often don't want to be brought into the light. But as the commission figures out how to fill the gaps and can come up with actually tangible metrics that we're trying to hit over whether it is a year, 2 years, 3 years, it'll help keep us focused so that we can do the work that the commission's intending to do.
Excellent. Excellent recommendation. Thank you.
I agree with that. I know A.G. Moody, I mean, she is, data. What are the outcomes? So that's really one of her big focuses with this, too, is to be able to measure the outcomes. So
That's
good
a
point.
beautiful thing. My meeting in about an hour is exactly on that topic. So, so I do appreciate that, but we do need to set our own, goals. But harvesting the data and way we can share that data so that we can see where we're having the greatest amount of impact, what we can be done, how do we improve law enforcement as well as judicial outcome. I think all of that plays a great opportunity for us to have true metrics for success. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Any other items?
So one thing as we move forward with these meetings that we can consider is a speaker series. I've spoken with several of you about that possibility. So if that's something that you think would be a way of kind of engaging the phenomenon kind of writ large, right? We can bring in different speakers to tell us what's going on and see how we can connect the dots as a way of filling those gaps and making sure that we're connected to both statewide efforts and local, very innovative initiatives. So if you have ideas and can send them to me, we can start plugging those in. Make sense?
Dr. Curry, Madam Chair, we have the press here today, and we're televising this meeting on Hillsborough County Television. I don't know if the county has thought about possibly airing information to the general public on identifying these issues in the community for the everyday person that is a fan of Hillsborough County Television, right? That loves to stay up and watch those late meetings
show ever.
and some of those infomercials. But on top of our regular media that's very interested in this topic, if the county and maybe even city television decided to air, and school board has, I believe, a channel as well, information on this issue and how our community can be engaged in proactively preventing or reporting, I think that might be helpful.
That's a terrific idea. We will have a website location for this, and I'm sure as we evolve, we'll have great opportunities to do just exactly that. But in the meantime, we're counting on everything that's already out there as well as those that are covering this. So, HCTV is like the best programming ever. You get to see me on television many times a day. It's just fabulous. No, but I think it is a great place to start. We have signage in various different establishments that also help, but I think we will develop an outreach campaign. That's part of that campaign as this all evolves. So great idea. We'll make sure we put that on there too. Any other topics? Excellent. Seeing none, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. Thank you so much for being here today.
Good to see you.